And
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dojo Live, the future from those creating it. We are live now on different platforms from YouTube or Dojo Live website and now from LinkedIn. I present myself. My name is Dulce from near South Hermosillo in Mexico. And my co-host, always nice to see you, Tulio Siragusa from Los Angeles. How are you doing, Tulio?
I am doing great, thank you. I'm looking forward to this interview. I met Utpal in Miami a few months ago, so I'm excited to have him as a guest.
Awesome. So, well, last but not least, from Mexico City, Carlos Ponce. Carlos, how are you?
I'm doing fine, thanks. Struggling a little bit with my glasses here, but everything's fine. And thank you, Dulce.
Okay, great. So thank you, friends, for being here to get to know our very special guest today. He's the Global Head of Innovation and New Product Incubation at CWT, previously Carlson Wagon Leads Travel. And his current role, he's responsible for leading and nurturing an innovation culture. So let's give a warm welcome to Utpal Kaul. Thank you, Utpal, for being here with us today at Dojo Live.
Thank you for having me, Dulce, and thank you for having me, Tulio and Carlos. Happy to be here.
Great, awesome. So we're going to have a lot of fun today. But before I start asking questions, so Utpal, please tell our audience a short brief about your background.
Sure, yeah. So my name is Utpal. It's a little bit of a tongue twister, so don't worry if you get it wrong. I'm responsible for leading the innovation culture here at CWT. My role specifically is to lead new product incubation. That's a part of our overall innovation strategy. And what that means in layperson's terms is we look at new technologies, emerging trends, startups that may solve a particular pain point within the travel distribution ecosystem. And we then assess it in terms of the scalability or fit within this, within our framework and within the general travel ecosystem. And if it does meet those criteria, then we tend to run, pilots with these startups, and we create what we call a minimum viable product to see if it meets the performance criteria that were established earlier on, or does it hold to the promise. And if it does, then we essentially have multiple options to choose from. We can license the technology from the startup, or have some kind of a commercial agreement with them, or it could even be that we tested it, it's a good piece of technology, but at this point of time, it's not the time is not right, and we move on. So we have plenty of options to choose from. So my role is essentially to facilitate that whole process. And quickly, in my previous life, I used to lead the lodging vertical at Expedia. I was responsible for the Western region of the United States and parts of ski. And I had started with Expedia when it was almost a startup, not quite, but by the time I left, they had 15,000 employees.
Wow. So, well, talking about the experience travel, today specifically, or today's topic is applications of artificial intelligence and emerging technologies in travel. So please tell us, Utpal, why did you choose this topic?
Yeah, so a couple of reasons. One is that no conversation these days is complete without talking about artificial intelligence. But more importantly, travel is one of those products that touches each and every one of us. We've all traveled in the past, whether it's for personal needs or for business needs. And also, travel covers multiple verticals. Like part of travel is payments. You have to make a payment, so payments technology is important. Health and wellness, sustainability. So these are all elements that resonate with every single person. And because this ecosystem is so fragmented, we're always looking at ways to make it seamless and more painless for the traveler, to make that experience more worthwhile. And technology has a great role to play in that.
So you recently I'm getting a little feedback. Okay, let's try that again. You recently rebranded. Was that why did that happen? Was that also an initiative in aligning with some of the things you're doing? Is there some kind of new approach to the market you guys are trying to accomplish? Give us a little background of sort of where you're coming from and where you're trying to go with your rebranding strategy.
Yeah, so the new branding strategy is not necessarily something that is within my remit. It's a strategic decision that Carlson CWT made to migrate from a URL called Carlson Wagoner Travel, or the name called Carlson Wagoner Travel, to more concise. And also, I'm sure there's plenty of considerations other than that, but unfortunately, it's not something that was a product of the new product development effort.
Okay. So where do you stand in terms of the market you're serving? What is your primary customer? Who is your primary customer?
Yes, and Tulio, your audio is fading in and out a little bit, but I got the gist of your question. CWT essentially is what we call a TMC, or a travel management company. So we manage travel for corporations. So when you have companies like General Electric or Amazon or Google, or any other company, they spend a huge amount of money on employee travel, or interview candidate travel, or meetings and events and stuff. So there has to be someone who can provide a couple of services to them. One is not just a couple, there's plenty more, but you'll get the gist. One is just to provide policy compliance. So different classes of employees have different eligibility criteria. Someone has to manage that. And if you're traveling, you get stuck at an airport and you need to call someone to reroute you, someone has to answer the phone and give you options. And then you provide, also reporting and intelligence on how to optimize your spend. So there's a bundle of services that go with employee travel or corporate travel that someone needs to provide for. And obviously, it's not the core product or the core competence of these companies to do it themselves. So they contract out third parties, in this case TMCs, us to manage those services for them.
So you predominantly services for corporate travel. How is like the emergence of new applications and just putting things at the fingertip of the actual consumer? What has that introduced in terms of challenges for serving those end users? I understand you said something about compliance, right? So it's like you're kind of forced, if you're in a corporate environment, to use the platform, but how are you addressing the ongoing needs of the end traveler who might have different tools at their accessibility? Is that some of the gaps or opportunities that you're seeing that you're looking to bridge?
Sure. So regardless of whether it's travel for business reasons or travel for your personal needs, there are some elements that straddle both of these verticals, or both of these dimensions, which would be things like what happens if you miss a connection, or your travel gets disrupted for some reason. You still have the same problem to solve for. And there's a lot of technologies now that kind of provide that seamless completeness or continuity in travel. For example, we have a huge improvement now, thanks to artificial intelligence, in predicting the likelihood of an event. So, for example, if you knew a day before your travel that your flight is most likely going to get delayed, or you're going to miss an onward connection, even if the flight doesn't get canceled, but there is a 30-minute layover and you may not be able to meet that because of some reason, it can have a huge impact, not just on your experience, but also your decision to travel. So we now have the ability actually to forecast with a very high degree of accuracy on what's going to happen for your specific flight, and if you have an onward connection. And this can apply for both leisure travel as well as personal travel. Similarly, there is technology now that can predict airfare volatility, so which essentially provides the traveler or the user, or empowers the user to make an informed decision on whether this is the right time to book your travel, or should you wait a few days. Similarly, there are other technologies that can ease the whole travel experience, like facial recognition and so on and so forth, that essentially eliminates the need for you to show your identification proof at every single checkpoint during your experience. You can simply use your biometrics as your access key. So it has a whole lot of applications in this industry.
Well, that's super cool. Which markets are adapting that faster than others? I'm assuming you guys have clients worldwide. This is an international business that you're running. Where are you seeing more adoption, biometrics and things like that?
I know for a fact that in US, a couple of airlines, JetBlue and Delta, have piloted facial recognition as your identity or biometrics validation of your travel. I think Atlanta is an airport where Delta is running this, and JetBlue has started this. I believe in New York. I could be wrong on which specific airport. But this is a technology that has arrived. It's only a matter of time before it becomes mainstream, whereby instead of having to show your identification every single checkpoint, you simply use your biometrics to pass through security and onward to the aircraft.
So is this a solution that you're providing to your customers, or are you partnering up with third parties that are doing that?
So there are two parts to the question. So some of the technologies that I want to talk about may not be things that we already are providing to our travelers. So it's generally what's happening in this space. And some of these solutions we are providing to our clients. For example, the facial recognition is not something that we are providing currently. It's an airport thing. An airline has to provide that. So our existence or not doesn't really impact that. So it's coming. So, there are so many things we can do with it, but the predictive analytics platform that can tell you if your flight is most likely to get disrupted or delayed by a certain percentage. So that's something that we do offer our clients. And the way we do this is we partner with third parties and startups. We help them build this product, test it, make sure that there is a product market fit, and provide consulting to startups essentially, so the product can be then eventually presented to the client. So that part we do.
Great news. Turn it to you. And also, if anybody has questions in the audience, I apologize that we're having audio issues. You can submit them at Dojo Live on Twitter, or if you're watching on LinkedIn Live, you can do that there as well. I have a follow-up question. I'm curious to learn about how you're going about prioritizing what your what initiatives or product or features you want to add, and how you're working with startups. Before we do that, I just want to turn it to Dulce in case she has some additional questions first.
Yes, I do have a question. So we've been hearing this word innovation since technology has been part of our lives in almost everything that we do. So for you, what's innovation?
That's an interesting one. So what is innovation? So technically anything that would improve an experience or a process would qualify as innovation. Now, specifically with us and in our group, we are looking for essentially three things. One is that any technology or use case that can significantly improve the experience of the traveler would qualify as innovation, or anything that can help drive operational efficiency significantly would qualify as innovation, or anything that can help our clients. So we have a duty of care responsibility to our clients. So anything that can help them significantly optimize their travel spend would qualify as innovation. And innovation could also be something that can totally disrupt this landscape tomorrow. So we need to be ahead of the curve and be aware of what could be coming. So those are the things that would qualify as innovation in our world.
Great response. Thank you.
How do you validate what your clients need? Do you have some kind of a roundtable with some key clients? How do you go about getting feedback for planning purposes in terms of how to best serve them? What's your process for doing that today?
We actually do. We actually do have frequent interactions with our clients, whereby we do a couple of things. One, we show them what we are working on, and also present metrics around the performance of these projects. And keep in mind, once we only adopt a project once we go through a very careful analysis and due diligence. So all ideas are good ideas. So when a startup comes to us, clearly they have done their homework, they're solving a particular pain point, but then it's up to us to determine how big of a pain point is it and how much value it can drive. So we do assess startups based on the metrics of scalability and the total value it brings. And then we adopt this, the idea of the use case and work with startups to then measure the results. And part of the process is also to share with our clients what we are working on and how it's performing. But then we also ask for feedback on A, if it is relevant to them, and B, if there's anything that's a pain point currently that they are seeing and we are not, then we solicit that feedback. And so it's a two-way process, a two-way dialogue.
But if I'm a startup or an engineer, or CTO, or someone who has an idea or is thinking about doing a startup and has expertise in travel technology, what does the process look like to understand your needs and requirements and build something that might be a good fit that could either become licensed, or I think you mentioned you might even acquire a company that might drive or create something that's extremely valuable? What's the process for doing that?
So there are two parts to your question. One is around licensing and acquisition. So acquisition is not something that's within my remit. So we have a dedicated team of people that look at if there is a potential acquisition that will add value to CWT, and they go through their own due diligence on that. But the first part of your question was, how should a startup work with us? So the way we operate is more so than us telling a startup what to do. We look at so we go with the belief that if you create a piece of technology, you have thought through very carefully the problem that you're trying to solve. So if a startup, and this is my personal view, not necessarily CWT's view, um, my view is that if a startup hasn't done that homework, I would strongly encourage them, because we do interact with a lot of startups. We see on average like 300 startups a year. So if you want to get, so obviously it takes bandwidth to view the startup. So if you haven't gone through the due diligence, my strong recommendation is do that and find out what's the problem that you're trying to solve. Once you've identified a problem you're trying to solve, you can build a piece of technology to solve it. And that point of time, communicate to us, hey, this is what you have. We'll review it. I also have a team of people that go through this exercise, and we can provide feedback on what needs to be done from this point on, or if you already have everything that we need. So it becomes more of a dialogue at that point of time.
Very cool. Dulce, you have some additional questions, or Carlos, any questions from the audience?
I'm sorry, too. There was a mute. No, we don't have any questions from the audience yet, Julia.
Okay, great. Dulce, anything that you wanted to ask?
Yes. Going back to the innovation part, how do you promote innovation within your own company?
Sorry, my phone rang. How do we promote innovation within CWT? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So we have a dedicated team called Innovation and New Product Development that is headed by a CTO, and that essentially has kind of visibility throughout the organization. And the executive sponsorship on initiatives like this is very important. We do have a lot of encouragement, support, and visibility with the CEO and stuff. So it does make a big difference when there is that executive level sponsorship. And also what we do, because we are such a large organization and we are global in scope, so we do have very frequent touch points with the business leaders of within CWT and showcase what we are working on and also seek feedback from that perspective. So that's been very, very helpful.
Okay, great.
Utpal, what drove the decision to want to look at this model, right? There's a lot of companies that have the build, license, or acquire model, right? They're usually large organizations, and they have their reasons for doing that. You know, they just maybe not nimble enough, fast enough, or they're looking for new innovation that they just can't get to in-house. What drove that decision for you guys?
So that's a great question, Tulio. I'm glad you asked. So at any given point of time for a large organization, there is a million things you could do, and some of these things are that you know exist, and some of these things you may not know exist, but you learn about through third parties or even online or through press, and you could be doing. But the reality is, every organization has to prioritize on where do you want to put your resources. And there is no organization that has unlimited resources or unlimited ideas. So then that's where the product pipeline becomes important. What is it? That's that we have already committed resources to and how much more time it will take. And then how much else can we fit into this product roadmap? And it's a finite number of projects. But if you want to test something that you want to test something, learn fast, and make a quick determination, you cannot do that. The only way we can do that is if we partner with third parties, in this case, startups, because startups are nimble, they're hungry, they can iterate fast, and then some areas might be niche that they have discovered that we simply haven't. That's how disruption happens. That's how innovation happens. So it allows us to run multiple products in parallel. Some of these scale, some of them don't manage to go past the first few stage gates, and then we move on. So we have deliberately chosen this model so we can test more things more quickly, and the odds are the more things you test, you will find something that is scalable.
You know, over the years, I've been in 30 years now. Over the years, what I've noticed is that inside of companies, you've got really good talented IT people, right? They could do a systems integration initiative using third-party software, whether it's a supply chain or your P platform or accounts payable or whatever, right? But building a product from scratch is a very different DNA. Do you think that this is a model that other companies should adapt? What's your opinion in terms of how could companies that are sort of trying to be innovative, trying to reinvent themselves, trying to fill gaps in the marketplace, is this an approach that could work for every company? What's your opinion?
I believe, yes, this model could work for all the companies. And I'll go a step further, and I would argue that this is the only sustainable way for organizations to drive innovation. And I'll explain to you why. Um, if you build a product in-house, regardless of whether it's a good product or a great product or somewhere in the middle, you attach a certain amount of effort to it. There is a lot of people involved, and the more time and effort you spend on a product, the more I guess passionate you become, but you also become kind of a little bit too attached to the product. So there is a possibility that you lose focus on what was the original problem that you were trying to solve, and if the results aren't always black and white. It's working or not. So the output lands on a spectrum between works 100% of the time and works no percent of the time. So the question is, at what point do you make the determination if it's working or not? So internally, it becomes hard. But if you're working with a third party, so you have that level of, I guess, distance, or being a little bit dispassionate, not on what you do, but on the results. So you can take an objective view of if it's going to work or not. So your barrier to exit is a lot lower if it's an external driven or an externally developed product than an internally developed product. Similarly, the barrier to entry also is a lot lower with working with startups than with internal. With internal products, you have to go through a lot of approval. There's a lot more stakeholders, and inherently, a lot more stakeholders means the process gets delayed, and you could build a product when the product is already outdated. I'm not saying it's going to happen all the time, but it does happen. With startups, you don't have that limitation. So I do believe this is the only sustainable way for organizations to drive innovation within.
But the model's got to be different than your typical procurement process. I mean, most companies are looking for well-baked products, right? That they can just license. So what's your advice in terms of, first of all, what is the right area in the organization to drive this kind of initiative that you have in place? Is it product? Is it the marketing? Is it the chief technology officer? Which place in the organization should drive this? And then secondly, what kind of advice do you have for organizations that are sort of on the fence about this on how to approach it? Because you have to be very flexible to work with a startup and go through a proof of concept phase. It's not like, hey, where's the product? It's ready. Let's try it. What advice do you have anybody thinking about doing this?
Yeah. Well, I think if we go one step back, before you license a product, the question that we would ask in innovation is, what is the value it's going to bring? So you will get to that decision on making a buy versus build decision once you have a clear understanding of the value. So we do help in that. We do help ascertain what is the relative value in either having it or not, and also what are the options. So all of this is a part of the innovation effort that goes and questions the fundamentals of what problem are you trying to solve and how big is the problem.
Right, but who's driving that internally within? So if I'm thinking about implementing this in my organization, how do I go about it? What's the journey been like to go about it? Is this something that's part of the guys who are evaluating products? Is it procurement? Is it is it a separate initiative altogether? And do you end up competing with the CTO's office, or you partner with them? I'm trying to understand how you organize this kind of effort, so others who might be watching could learn from that.
Yeah. So we at CWT, we are a part of the product and technology group. So that's what the umbrella organization is and the sponsoring organization is. But really, for any organization, it could just as well fall under the marketing org. As long as you have executive sponsorship of this initiative from top down, you will forge those internal alliances, and then it doesn't really matter which org necessarily you belong to, because eventually everything rolls up to the top. So that's most critical. But if it does not, on the other hand, have executive sponsorship, then it doesn't matter how it's structured. These things will essentially be those academic exercises that you do, but don't necessarily drive any value. So if I was to counsel you on what you should do, I would argue that it needs executive sponsorship first and foremost.
I think that's really good. Dulce, do you have any questions?
I think we're all running almost out of time, but before we wrap this up, I would like to know if you have any words of wisdom for our audience.
I don't know about wisdom, but what I can say is that purely based on my experience, that if you're a product person or an engineer, or you're toying with the idea of a startup, spend a lot of time thinking through what is the problem you're trying to solve, and the solution that you come up with, how big of a value does it represent. So test yourself, test your own assumptions. Do not think that just because you believe something is a problem will be a problem. So test your own assumptions and think through very hard on that.
So one last, because that is the question. You've seen a lot of presentation, I'm sure. You've seen a lot of startups. You've seen different models for how people go about doing that kind of research and preparing themselves. Is there one in particular that stands out for you? I mean, is more like a lean canvas that's a better fit for people? Should they follow more of Osterwilder kind of model? What recommendation would you have? And anyone who's trying to develop their minimal viable segment, a minimal viable product, what have you seen work best for some of the organizations that work with you?
So the thing that I think has a greater the path that I believe has greater odds of scalability is if you have an idea, you also need to do some due diligence to gather domain expertise. As they say, the devil is in the detail. Just because an idea makes sense doesn't always mean it's a workable idea. So to get that, to layer on that domain expertise on top of the core idea goes a long way.
Great words of advice. Thank you for being with us. We're up on time. It's always like that when we're starting to have fun. I appreciate you being with us. Thank you. Dulce, want to wrap it up? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Paul, for being here with us today. As Tulio said, we're already having fun when we have to wrap this up. But I don't know, Carlos, if you have information for next episode on Dojo Live.
Actually, sorry about that. Actually, here's the thing. I do, but I don't. And this is because we already know who our guest is, but as the website is being uploaded, our development guy has not really uploaded the info that we need to get out there. So it's not updated. That's what I'm talking about. So I'll have that. Just keep an eye on our social networks, and it'll be all there, and it'll be pretty much updated soon. But the good thing is that we got the final version running up, and of our new dress. That's why I call it.
Speaking of site, we haven't mentioned it, but now you can get the podcast version of this interview. You can get the transcript.
Yeah. Oh, the transcript, yes.
Curated news. So Dojo Live is relaunching itself, and today was the first time we went live. So the future guest feature functionality will be up probably in the next day. But I'm excited to let everybody know that you can now get the podcast version of these interviews.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, awesome, guys. So thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, audience, for always keeping up with us every week. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day and keep watching Dojo Live.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.